Hello everybody, welcome to my new webcast. In this webcast we are going to talk about SQL Server 2012 and more specifically about the database engine. I hope that you all saw the trailer. My name is Artemakis Artemiou. I'm a SQL Server MVP and here we go. The agenda for this webcast is the following. First we are going to talk about high availability, then manageability enhancements, of course, programmability enhancements for all the developers out there, performance and scalability enhancements, and last but not least, security enhancements in this new version of SQL Server. High availability. First, we have the always-on SQL Server failover cluster instances with the introduction of multi-subnet failover clusters, where each failover cluster node is connected to a different subnet or different set of subnets. Now, these subnets can be either in the same location or in geographically dispersed sites. Therefore, a multi-subnet failover cluster provides not only high availability, but a disaster recovery solution as well. Another feature is now there is a flexible failover policy for cluster health detection. So there is an addition of failover condition level property that allows you to configure a more flexible failover policy. And of course, indirect checkpoints, where this feature provides a database specific alternative to automatic checkpoints. Then we have the always-on availability groups. That is actually a container that defines a set of user databases called availability databases to fail over as a single unit. Each availability group requires at least 2 availability replicas, the primary replica and one secondary replica. Now, the always-on availability groups provides a rich set of options that improve database availability and also enable improved resource use. There are many always-on availability groups tools. For example, we have T-SQL DDL statements for creating and managing availability groups. There are several SQL Server Management Studio wizards, like the new Availability Group wizard that creates and configures an availability group. There is the Add Database to Availability Group wizard that adds one or more primary databases to an existing availability group. The Add Replica to Availability Group wizard, the Failover Availability Group wizard, and so on. There are also the always-on dashboard that provides an at-a-glance view of the health of an availability group, and many other features like Object Explorer Details pane, PowerShell commandlets, and much more. Another very important new feature that falls in the category of high availability is online operations. So now, regarding online operations, there is extended support for online index builds and rebuilds. So when you have tables having columns of type varchar max or nvarchar max, var binary max, and even XML columns, you can run operations like build and rebuild on these tables, on these columns, without demanding the index to be offline. So you have reduced downtime for application upgrade, database advanced database maintenance, and so on. Now, in the category of manageability, the first feature is that you can specify startup parameters in SQL Server Configuration Manager so you don't have to manually edit that command sequence. Rather, you just add your parameter through the graphical user interface, and it is passed to the SQL Server instance command sequence automatically. There are many T-SQL debugger enhancements. You can now debug T-SQL scripts running on instances of SQL Server 2005 SP2 or later. There are many enhancements in T-SQL breakpoints. For example, you have hit count, filter, location. The watch and quick watch support T-SQL expressions. The quick info pop-up, where you move the cursor over a T-SQL identifier and you get a quick info pop-up displaying the name of the expression and its current value. There are many T-SQL intelligence enhancements like breakpoint validation, T-SQL code snippets. So yes, like in Visual Studio development environment, same now in SQL Server 2012 Management Studio, there is a code snippets manager where you can import and organize snippets. I actually developed a simple tool and made it available to the community that you get a form and graphical user interface where you just enter some parameters along with the query you like, and the snippet generator it actually generates an XML file which is the snippet, and then via the code snippets manager in SSMS 2012 just import this file, and there you have your new snippet, your new custom snippet. And you can also surround T-SQL statements with snippets like the begin, end, closes, and so on. There are also improvements in database restore. There is an improved algorithm for constructing restore scenarios, and an improved point-in-time restore where you get a visual timeline allowing you to easily select the point in time where you want to restore your database. That's a screenshot of snippets generator. It was in beta version, and in late August this year I released the first stable version. So be my guest and download it. You can freely use it, experiment with it, and as always, your feedback is more than welcome. Now, regarding the restore operation, and more specifically about the page restore dialog, you can check database pages for corruption, and you have the ability to restore selected corrupt pages from a database backup. And one of my favorites, contained databases. We are now with this new feature, brand new feature, the partially contained databases. You can easily move databases from one instance of SQL Server to another, and you don't have to worry anymore about the traditional issue of having orphaned users, that is, users not being associated to a login, because users in contained databases are not needed any longer to be associated with logins on the instance of SQL Server. And of course, you have full database portability. You can move databases among instances without having to worry about logins. And of course, that has a great side effect on applications that use specific database users for accessing the database. Regarding Windows PowerShell, PowerShell version 2 is now prerequisite for installing SQL Server 2012. And there are some new commandlets like backup SQL database and restore SQL database. Some other options, the K option that was added to BCP.exe and SQL CMD.exe. Some behavioral changes to the SQL CMD executable. Some new enhancements on the database engine tuning advisor, new and modified management functions views, and another neat feature is that in the query editor, 0 is represented with it has diagonal line in the circle, so you can with this change you will never mix again the O with the 0. Okay, let's jump to the first demo and see in action the manageability features of SQL 2012. See how we can specify some new startup parameters. So we enter the properties of SQL Server instance, and here on the startup parameters tab, you can see that you can add your parameters here, click on add, and they are then added to the existing parameters of SQL Server instance. Great. Now let's see some T-SQL breakpoint enhancements. So that's the new SSMS of SQL Server. You can see that it's more similar to the Visual Studio IDE, and that's the main concept of the involvement of Management Studio, the way I see it. So let's say you have some code here, you have this script, you want to put a breakpoint, that's the breakpoint, and you see here the new features of about breakpoints. You have hit count, where you specify a condition here. You have filters, conditions, and much more. Now about snippets generator. I have the executable here. Let me run it. So you see that's the only screen of snippets generator. So I'm going to create a new snippet. What about the snippet, the TSQL code returning the service pack installed on your SQL Server instance? I'm going to give the title SP installed. Description returns service pack information. The author is me, and the code is okay, sorry about that. Product level Great. We click on Generate Snippet and we select where to put the snippet file. I'm going to put it here, so I'm going to copy the path to this directory. sp-info, that's the name of the file. And you see that the snippet was successfully generated. Cool. Now in SSMS, I use Code Snippets Manager for importing my snippet. I select the directory that contains my snippet file. So here you see that's the file generated with by snippets generator. I'm going to add it to the custom snippets location. So okay. Now if you want to use the snippet, you just right click, select insert snippet, you get to the directory of the snippet you like, and in custom snippets you see the sp installed snippet. So just double click this and you see that the T-SQL code embedded in the snippet now gets appeared on your query window. And I run it, and as you see I have the release to manufacturing version of SQL Server 2012. Great. So now we are going to see how we can restore databases in specific points in time using the new visual timeline. So if you go to first, we're going to take a backup of the database. Alright, that should do it. Then you go to Tasks, Restore Database. And here in Timeline, you see that you have the ability to select a point in time for restoring the database. That's very helpful for the database administrator, because always visual timelines are easier to be read instead of other approaches. So I kept the best for the end of this first demo, that is contained databases. So I'm going to create a new database. So contained DB, it's a name, and then I'm going to the options, and you see here you can select the containment type. Currently SQL Server only supports partially contained databases, but that does the job. So we can select this, click OK, and our contained database is created. Of course, before doing that, we should check that whether contained databases feature is enabled or not. So if you go to the properties, of SQL Server, in the Advanced tab, here you can see that contained databases are enabled. You can also change this feature with sp-configure. So you can do this either from the graphical user interface or using T-SQL scripts. Okay. The next step is just to create a dummy table, some dummy data in it. So id int name varchar. Okay. table name is table 1. We see that we have our table here. I'm going to add some values. Okay. So you see now we have some sample values in the table. And I'm going to create a new user for accessing this contained database. The difference from the traditional approach is that if this was not a contained database, I would go to security, create a login, and then via the login the local database user would be created. Now I just go to the database security tab. I go to users and create a new user. This user can be a SQL Server with a user with password, or with login, or without login. I'm just going to create a SQL Server with a user with password. Is test user, simple password. And here the membership, I'm going to give him I'm going to give to this user database owner role membership. So we have our user. Now we disconnect from the SQL Server instance, and we will try to connect with that user. So first we have to go to options. We enter the database name. And you see that we managed to connect to the SQL Server instance engine using the user we created in the contained database without having a login or anything else. So now our user has access to the SQL Server instance and can access all the database objects in contained DB. For example, we can run a select query. You see that we get results. We can update the table. You see, and thus fully access the database. Now, if we move this database to another instance of SQL Server, that would be all. We won't be needing anything else, because the user that is being used for the authorization process is just the user created and stored within our contained database. That's pretty cool, huh? Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Okay. So, programmability. First, native XML web services is removed. File tables, which is an amazing feature built on top of file stream technology. It allows you to store files and documents in special tables in SQL Server and access them from Windows applications as if they were stored in the file system. So with this feature, there are you won't be needing to do any changes to the Windows applications that use this technology. So in summary, you can access files stored in SQL Server tables via your file system. Statistical semantic search provides deep insight into unstructured documents stored in SQL Server databases. There are some new full text search enhancements like property search, customizable near, new word breakers and stemmers. The execute statement, which now can specify the metadata returned from a statement by using with the results sets arguments. UTF-16 support, so there are some supplementary characters collections. New enhanced spatial features like enhancements to spatial data types, some spatial performance improvements, other spatial improvements like spatial helper store procedures. The ad hoc query page implementation, where you can specify a range of rows returned by select statement based on row offset and row count values that you provide. This is very useful when you want to control the number of rows sent to a client application for a given query. Sequence objects. Hey, they're finally here. Sequence objects, the long-awaited feature in SQL Server database engine, which allows you to have a user-defined schema about object that generates a sequence of numeric values according to the specification that you set. And of course, you all know that this operates similarly to an identity column, and it is very, very useful in the development of data applications. Throw statement, where it can be used for raising an exception and transfer execution to a catch block of a try-catch statement. There are 14 new functions and a changed function. There are conversion functions like parse, try-convert, try-parse. There are date and time functions like the end of month function. Logical functions like choose or if, and two new string functions, the concat that concatenates strings and the format. A great new feature is the SQL Server Express Local DB, that is actually a lightweight edition of SQL Express. There is zero configuration for this SQL Server instance. You don't need to set up anything. It contains all the programmability features of SQL Server Express, and it is extremely useful for developers. There are new enhanced query optimizer hints like the for seek hint, which is now enhanced, where you can specify an index column to further control the access method of the index. The for scan table hint is a new one. It complements the for seek hint by specifying that the query optimizer uses only an index scan operation as the access path to the table or view referenced in the query. The over clause has been extended to support window functions. So now we continue with the second set of demos. We're going to see programmability features of SQL Server 2012 in live action. Okay, now we're going to see how we can create and use file tables. Well, first of all, we need to configure our instance for supporting file stream access. So I do this and reconfigure. So by using file stream access level option, set to 1, now we have access to file stream. Then we have to create a file stream database. So this is my database, and now in the file group, file stream group 1, you can see that the file name is not a file, but rather a directory to see events sampledb's data.fs. So all data will be eventually stored in that directory and be accessed through T-SQL or from the file system as well, depending on the access level you give. Okay, it didn't work. There's a small problem, I guess. So something was wrong with the permissions. Let me try again. Let's try again. And voila, our database with a file stream enabled is now created. Now let's use this database for creating a file table. That's my file table. I specify the file table directory, the collation. So the table is created. I go to table, to database, then to the table, file tables. You see our document storage here. When you right click, explore file table directory, you can see of course that the location cannot be opened. Let me check this out. Okay, problem. You see that I cannot access this share on the file system level. So the first thing we need to check is if we're allowed to access this on the file system level and not just only using T-SQL. So you see now in the server properties, in the file stream tab, file stream category, you see that the file stream access level is transact SQL access enabled. The thing is that we want to enable full access, meaning that besides transact SQL access, we also need to have file system access in order to be able to just move files or delete files from that directory and the changes to be reflected on the SQL Server database instance. Okay, let's enable this. We need to restart the SQL Server instance. No problem. Can do that from the configuration manager. So yep, always use the configuration manager for handling services. So now I'm just restarting the instance. And let's try now to access the share on the file system level. You see, our share is accessible, and we can actually do the same thing via SSMS. So we go to our file stream database, the table, that was the wrong database. Now we go to the files table, SampleDB, tables, file tables, right click on my file table and explore file table directory. You see my user is authenticated, and now I can just put objects here. Let's say copy all these scripts to here. You see I'm allowed to do this. So actually now I store data in this folder, but my changes are also reflected on my file table created in the SQL Server instance. So if you go back to the query window and run a query on the document store table, you should be able to see the files listed. And you see, these are my files previously placed on the directory using a simple copy, but I can also manipulate these files and do whatever I like using T-SQL. So yeah, file tables is an extremely useful feature in SQL 2012, and especially in the cases where you have some pretty large objects you want to store into the database. Great. Now let's proceed and have a look at the sequences, the sequence data type. So I prepared some code for this. I'm not going to create test database because I already have it. I'm just going to use it. So you see here with this code, I create the sequence test sec. I defined it as a big integer in order to be able to have values that almost never earned. The starting value is 0 and it gets automatically increments by 1 each time. So I create the sequence, and with that command select next value for your sequence. In this case test sec, you get the new value. If you run this again, you get another value, and so on. You see the values gets incremented by 1 each time. Now with drop sequence, we dropped our sequence. You can see now that there is no sequence. And if we just want to reset the sequence, so now let's say we have the next value should be 7, but if we restart it with 1, you can see that the next value is 1. So sequence objects are very, very useful in the cases where you develop database applications and you want to have a unique number at any time within the scope of a database. Now let's test the throw statement enhancement. So I'm just going to create another test database, test db2. So yeah, I'm creating a sample table. Let's refresh our view here. You see sample table. Let's try that. You see that the first column is a primary key. So in the first case, I inserted the value 1. Then I tried to insert value 1 again. So the exception was thrown, and we got this this message. So in this begin catch code block, we could handle the exception, do whatever we like. I mean, do the appropriate, perform the appropriate actions, maybe notify the user or update a value in a control table, and then rethrow the exception with the throw command, the throw statement. Okay, now let's proceed to the next demo where we're going to see the ad hoc query implementation. I prepared the query as well for this demo. We're going to use the AdventureWorks 2008 R2 database. So yeah, by using the page size and page number variables, I can control the result set returned by my query. So you see, I just got the second set of 10 rows. If I change that, I will get the first one, and so on. This is very useful when you want to control the results returned by your query. Okay, last we're going to see some new functions like the concatenation function, concat. So with this function, you just add many parts of strings within as parameters. You just get a single string like this one. With the end of month function, you get the last day of the month. So for October, the last day is 31st. With format, you can convert the first argument to a specified format. You get the string value. Like, let's say I want to convert this date. So if I want to convert this to the Greek format, I'm going to get day, month, year. If I convert it to the US format, I'm going to get month, day, year. There are also some other functions. You can play with it and learn the exact, their exact behavior in the SQL Server database engine. Okay, let's proceed with the rest of the presentation. With regards to performance and scalability, SQL Server 2012 introduces the column store indexes. This is a new data warehouse query acceleration feature based on a new type of index called the column store. As shown earlier in the high availability category, again, yes, the online index rebuild offers not only high availability but also scalability and performance, because imagine having a maintenance plan that tunes the entire database or a set of databases having these kinds of columns. Imagine what the benefit is when you don't need to have your indexes offline for running rebuild operations. Partition support. Microsoft SQL Server 2012 supports up to 15,000 partitions by default. In earlier versions, the number of partitions was limited to 1,000 by default. And of course, file stream file groups can contain multiple files. Now, under the security category, we can see that there is provisioning during setup. So for enhancing role separation, built-in administrators in the local system are not automatically provisioned in the sysadmin fixed server role. Local administrators are able to access the database engine when they are in single user mode. Also, SQL Server now supports managed service accounts and virtual accounts when installed on Windows 7 or Windows Server 2008 R2 or later. New permissions. So running this query, you are able to see all the new permissions. And there is a new role management model introduced in this version of SQL Server, and based on this new role management model, you can create user-defined server roles. This is very useful because you can create, for example, a user-defined server role using other built-in server roles mixed up with some additional permissions and so on. So this gives you more freedom to create roles that best fit your needs. Default schema for groups. You can now define a default schema for a Windows group, and when an object is created by a Windows user and when a default schema is not specified, SQL Server no longer automatically creates a schema. SQL Server audit enhancements. There is support for server level auditing expanded to include all editions of SQL Server. This is very useful. And database level auditing is limited to enterprise, developer, and evaluation editions. Again, the contain database feature that allows database engine access limited to specific database users, because this is also a security feature, not only a manageability feature. With respect to hashing algorithms, the hash bytes function now supports the SHA 256 and SHA 512 algorithms. The certificate key length has been expanded from 3456 to 4096 bits. Service master key and database master key encryption changes from 3DS algorithm to AES. You can also create certificates from binary, and that leads us to the last demo where we're going to see performance and scalability as well as the new security features in SQL Server 2012. Let's close all these windows. Okay. So first we're going to see how we can create user-defined roles. It is very easy. When you go to Security tab, Server Roles, right-click here, you have now the option New Server Role. So I'm creating the test server role where it has memberships to, let's say, DB creator, but can also this secureable can also do the following. So this way you can create robust server roles that best fit your needs. The default schema for Windows group, let's say I have a Windows group, then I go here to logins, I create a new login. That's this is actually the Windows group. So I'm going to search for my group. I'm going to add the groups, object type, find now. I created a test group. That's my group here. And at user mapping, let's say I can give access to AdventureWorks as a DB owner and set as a default schema DBO for my group. Yep. So now all the users, all the Windows users that belong that group have access to the DBO schema and consequently on the database that I assigned to them. So the last thing I want to show you is the online index rebuild when you have tables having varchar max, so and similar data types. So I'm going to create this database, use it, create a table with two columns, an integer and the varchar max column. That's my database. Of course, I'm going to create an index. So I'm going to create a non-clustered index having columns the ID as an index key column and included column, the name column. Alright, and now I'm going to run the following, and during the time this is being run I'm going to rebuild the index. Of course, first let's put some sample data there. Great. So now you can see that my query gets executed, and during the execution of the query, I'm going to rebuild the index. And you see, no errors at all. So yes, it is possible to rebuild indexes without having to take these indexes offline, which is really great. So, summing up, we saw many new features shipped with this version of SQL Server 2012. First of all, we talked about the always-on availability groups, online operations, the enhanced T-SQL debugger IntelliSense. We learned about the new, more robust security model with contained databases, user-defined roles. File tables provides flexibility for the developer, as well as SQL Server Express local DB, and all these lead to an extremely powerful database engine. As this is a pre-recorded webcast, about the questions and answers session, please leave any comments or questions on my blog, the SQL Server and .NET blog. Thank you very much for attending this webcast. This is a list of resources that you can use for learning more on SQL Server 2012, as well as access to my blog and to snippets generator for SQL Server 2012. Thank you very much.